Though Alexander died young, his influence would shape the world for centuries. His conquests didn't just redraw maps, they changed the very fabric of civilization. After Alexander's death, a new age began, the Hellenistic era, a time when Greek culture, language and ideas spread across Asia and Africa. From Egypt to India, cities adopted Greek architecture, coins bore Greek inscriptions, and people studied Greek philosophy and science. This cultural fusion sparked an intellectual revolution. The most famous of Alexander's cities, Alexandria in Egypt, became a beacon of knowledge. The Library of Alexandria gathered scrolls from all corners of the world, from Babylonian astronomy to Indian mathematics. It attracted scholars, scientists, poets and philosophers, who built upon the knowledge of every culture Alexander had touched. Philosophy and science. Alexander's vision of uniting East and West inspired new schools of thought. Philosophers pondered ideas of universal brotherhood. Scientists, like Eratosthenes, calculated the Earth's circumference using methods preserved in Alexandria. Greek medical texts were studied alongside Egyptian healing practices. Mathematics, astronomy, and literature thrived under this exchange of ideas. Art and architecture. Sculptures began to show not just idealized Greek forms, but also elements of Persian and Indian influence. Temples and palaces mixed Greek columns with Eastern motifs. A new art style, realistic, emotional, and global, was born. Language and trade. Greek became the common language, Koine Greek, used for trade, governance, and scholarship. This allowed merchants, philosophers, and leaders from different regions to communicate, trade, and learn from each other. Trade routes connected the Mediterranean with India and even China, paving the way for the later Silk Road. Alexander in myth and legend. As centuries passed, Alexander became more than a historical figure. He became a legend. In Persian, Arabic, Indian, and even medieval European traditions, Alexander was known not just as a conqueror, but as a seeker of truth, a hero, and even a prophet. In the Quran, he is believed by some scholars to be the mysterious figure of Dhul-Qarnayn, the two-horned one, who travelled far and wide to spread justice. In India, tales of his meeting with philosophers and yogis emerged, stories where Alexander learned spiritual wisdom and humility. In medieval Europe, Alexander romances were written, part fact, part fiction, where he encounters dragons, sea monsters, and magical realms. A controversial figure. Despite his legendary status, Alexander remains a controversial figure. To some, he was a visionary leader, a unifier who sought to bring peace through cultural integration. To others, he was a ruthless conqueror whose ambition left millions dead and empires in ruin. He spread Greek culture, but also destroyed ancient civilizations. He respected local traditions, but ruled with absolute power. He dreamed of unity, but died before it could be realized. The question that remains. More than 2,000 years later, the world still asks, who was Alexander the Great, truly? A military genius? A philosopher king? A tyrant? Or perhaps all of them at once? What drove him? Ambition? Destiny? Or the desire to leave an immortal mark on history? No one can say for sure, but one thing is certain. Alexander the Great was not just a man of his time, he was a man ahead of his time. And long after empires have risen and fallen, his name still endures, etched into the stones of ancient cities, written in the pages of history, and whispered in the legends of every land he touched. Chapter 1. The Making of a Legend. Alexander was not born great, he made himself great. From his early childhood, stories were told to him of Achilles, the hero of the Iliad. Inspired by these ancient tales of glory, Alexander did not want to be just a king. He wanted to be a legend. He even kept a copy of the Iliad under his pillow, annotated by his mentor Aristotle. But it wasn't just stories that shaped him. It was the ambition of his father, King Philip II. Philip had united Macedonia and turned it into a powerful military state. He revolutionized the army, introducing the deadly phalanx formation, long spears and tight ranks, making Macedonian soldiers nearly unstoppable. Alexander watched and learned. He joined battles as a teenager. At the Battle of Chaeronea, he led a cavalry charge that helped crush the Greek alliance, proving to all that he was more than just a prince. He was a commander, a warrior, a rising star. Chapter 2: Rise of the King. When Philip was assassinated, possibly in a conspiracy involving his own court, Alexander wasted no time. At just 20 years old, he seized the throne, silenced his rivals, and quelled revolts in Greece. In Thebes, when the city rebelled, Alexander ordered it to be destroyed. Thousands were killed or sold into slavery. It was a brutal warning. Challenge Alexander, and you will fall. With Greece under control, he turned east to Asia Minor and began a campaign that would shake the ancient world. Chapter 3: Conquering the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire was vast, stretching from modern-day Turkey to Pakistan, but Alexander was undeterred. In 334 BCE, he crossed the Hellespont with just over 40,000 men and stepped onto Asian soil. At the Battle of Granicus, he led a bold river assault against a larger Persian army, almost dying in the process, but emerging victorious. Next came the Battle of Issus, where he personally charged at King Darius III, forcing him to flee. The Persian king left behind his family, including his wife, mother, and children, whom Alexander treated with honor. It was both a show of respect and power. Then came Tyre, a mighty island fortress. Alexander laid siege for 7 months, even building a causeway to reach it. When the city finally fell, he made an example of its resistance. His greatest victory came at Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Outnumbered, Alexander's tactical brilliance outmaneuvered the massive Persian army. Darius fled again, and this time his empire collapsed. Alexander now controlled Babylon, Susa, Persepolis, and Ecbatana, the heart of Persia. But he did not stop. Chapter 4: The March to the Ends of the Earth. Having conquered Persia, Alexander now dreamed of reaching the edge of the known world. He pushed into Central Asia, facing fierce resistance from tribes and rulers who refused to bow. In the harsh deserts of Bactria and Sogdiana, he faced ambushes, rebellions, and guerrilla warfare. Here, he met Roxana, a noblewoman from Bactria. He married her, not just for love, but to win the loyalty of the people. Alexander believed in fusion of cultures, peoples, and traditions. He began wearing Persian robes, adopting Eastern customs, and calling himself King of Asia. He even encouraged mass marriages between his soldiers and local women, blending bloodlines and building unity. But not all his men agreed. Chapter 5: Rebellion in the Ranks. The deeper he moved east, the more his army grew weary. They had marched thousands of miles, fought dozens of battles, and crossed unforgiving terrain. And now, their king was acting more Persian than Greek. At Sogdian Rock, a fortress thought impossible to conquer, Alexander's troops scaled cliffs and captured it, further proving his relentless drive. But the cost of ambition was high. His close friend Clytus, who once saved his life, criticized Alexander's Persian ways. In a drunken rage, Alexander killed him and was devastated afterward. It was a turning point. The boy king who once chased glory was now chasing something darker. Chapter 6. Into India. In 327 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hindu Kush into India. There, he faced a new world, lush, mysterious, and filled with unfamiliar cultures. At the Battle of the Hydaspes, he faced King Porus, a tall, brave warrior with elephants and thousands of soldiers. The battle was brutal. Elephants clashed with phalanxes, rain poured down. But Alexander won, and in a moment of rare humility, he restored Porus to his throne and made him an ally. But when Alexander wanted to push further, his men said no. They had reached the edge of the known world. The jungles of India stretched endlessly ahead. Exhausted, homesick, and fearful, they refused to go on. Chapter 7. The Long Road Home. The retreat from India was not a triumph, it was a test of survival. Instead of taking a safer route back, Alexander chose to lead part of his army through the brutal Gedrosian desert in modern-day southern Iran and Pakistan. The decision proved deadly. Under a scorching sun with little food or water, thousands of soldiers perished. Some say Alexander did it to match the hardships of legendary heroes like Hercules. Others believe it was a grave mistake. He was no longer just a conqueror. He had become a symbol of endurance, madness, and unshakable will. When they finally reached Babylon, Alexander was worn, not just in body, but in spirit. But he wasn't done. Chapter 8. A Greater Dream. Back in Babylon, Alexander began to dream bigger than ever. He was no longer content with conquering empires. He wanted to reorganize the world. He began planning massive building projects, roads and cities that would connect east and west, harbors that would open new sea routes, an expedition to conquer the Arabian Peninsula and perhaps Africa beyond it. He envisioned a cosmopolitan empire where Persians, Greeks, Egyptians, and Indians would all be equals under one king. He created a new army, not just of Macedonians, but of all peoples he had conquered. To many of his countrymen, it was too much. They had followed him for a decade. They had fought his wars. But now they saw a man who was more God than general, more Persian than Greek. Even his most loyal companions began to whisper behind closed doors.
Chapter 9. The Death of a Conqueror. Then, in 323 BCE, during a celebration in Babylon, Alexander suddenly fell ill. Fever, weakness, and paralysis struck him. Day after day, he grew worse. Some say it was malaria, others suspect typhoid, and many still believe it was poison, perhaps from a rival who feared what he might become. On his deathbed, his generals asked, "To whom do you leave your empire?" His answer was simple and terrifying: "To the strongest." With those words, Alexander, the boy who had tamed Bucephalus, the man who had defeated the Persian Empire, the king of a world-spanning realm, died at the age of 32. The world fell silent. Chapter 10. Aftermath and Division. With no named heir, chaos followed. His wife Roxana was pregnant, but no one waited. His generals, known as the Diadochi, carved the empire into pieces. Ptolemy took Egypt, Seleucus took the east, Antigonus fought for the heart of Asia Minor, and others scrambled for power. Wars erupted, friends turned on each other, cities burned, armies clashed. The unity Alexander dreamed of collapsed into decades of bloodshed. But out of the ashes, new kingdoms rose, blending Greek and Eastern cultures in a way the world had never seen before. Chapter 11. the lasting impact. Though his empire fell apart, Alexander's legacy endured. He founded over 20 cities, many named Alexandria, spreading Greek art, language, and architecture across continents. The Hellenistic period led to advances in science, astronomy, medicine, mathematics, and philosophy. His campaigns opened trade routes that would eventually become part of the Silk Road. Even centuries later, the Roman Empire, the Byzantine world, and Islamic scholars all traced their intellectual roots back to the Hellenistic world Alexander created. He became a symbol, not just of conquest, but of connection. Chapter 12. Alexander in History and Legend. Over time, Alexander transformed from a historical figure into a mythic hero. In Persia, he was remembered both as a great enemy and a visionary. In India, his stories merged with local traditions, where he met sages and learned about the soul. In Islamic tradition, he may be the mysterious Dhul Qarnayn mentioned in the Quran, a ruler who traveled to the ends of the earth. In Europe, the Alexander romances turned him into a knight, an explorer, a philosopher, and a dreamer. Even today, his name is spoken with awe. No other man has shaped the world so completely before turning 33. Final chapter. The man behind the legend. So who was Alexander the Great? Was he a genius or a madman? A liberator or a tyrant? A unifier of nations or a destroyer of worlds? Maybe he was all of these. His victories were unmatched, his vision was radical, and his story, like that of Achilles, became larger than life. He died young, but he lived more in those 12 years of conquest than most men do in a lifetime. His empire is gone, his cities have crumbled, but his dream of a world connected by knowledge, culture, and courage still echoes today. And that is why Alexander was called the Great.